Welcome to TGIF.
You tell us to do it all the time.
I do, over and over.
I think a lot of us say we do it all the time, but do we really do enough of?
And that takes us to the word of the day, which is pray. Pray.
And is it, I want this, I want that, Lord help me with this, Lord fix that? Is that our prayer?
Sometimes.
Or do we live a life with this depth of prayer that it's almost like this ongoing conversation with God? When does my prayer start? When does my prayer end? I struggle with that. I probably have a lot to say about it because I struggle with, did I pray enough? Or were my prayers when and how they should have been? Or is it this constant conversation?
Are they perfect words? You know, you're looking for the perfect words because this is the God of all creation. So you want a perfect prayer for the God of all creation. But yeah, what we see today in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 10, this is amazing how vulnerable Hannah is. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. That doesn't sound like the perfect words or the perfect prayer.
Right.
I mean, this is somebody who's in great anguish. And so we back up. Why is she in such anguish? Well, what we find out is that she's unable to have children. But Peninnah is having many children and having no problem and flaunting it terribly in front of Hannah. And so it's that flaunting and that taunting. Every time they would go up to the tabernacle and give their offering, she would be teased and made fun of. And if you've ever been teased or made fun of, you know, maybe like the first time you kind of joke around with it, but you know, it gets old really fast. And so I can only imagine what she was feeling. But even her husband wasn't compassionate to her because he's like, well,
I'm enough.
What do you need with these kids? I'm just like, oh, bad answer for marriage. Bad answer for marriage. So understanding a person's hurt is really hard. Understanding where they're hurting, how they're hurting, it's never easy to understand. But the heart of God that we see in Hannah here is really overwhelming the hurt she has, because this prayer is interesting because part of the prayer is that she is praying for a child, obviously, but that this child is going to be set apart for God. I think we all pray for our children, but the idea that she is going to go and take him to the temple and leave him there to be raised by the priest, that's huge. You know, yes, she will keep him through the weaning stage and have him and cuddle him and nurture him, and that'll nurture her. But still she's saying, no, this is your child, Lord, and I'm taking him to the temple. And so I think this is a huge selfless prayer. Motives, there are some motives, right? Because she wants to have a child. But the motives are really about the bigger heart. And I think that's what, when we look at Samuel, that's what we're going to see throughout this whole book. Where's the heart of God's people?
And being a woman who was able to have children, but knowing people who are unable to have children, I can't say I relate to them because I was able to have children. So it's really trying to understand a hurt that, you know, maybe you're in that situation that you can relate to what Hannah experienced. But just like you said, it goes even deeper, because for her to say, if I have this child, Lord, I'm giving him back to you. He is yours. The follow through in that.
Right.
The follow through. I mean, I've got daughters right now that can't leave their child for 2 hours without messing up, let alone to say, okay, Lord, he is yours. So that heartfelt prayer, it was genuine, it was deep. And I think when we think of prayer life, we have to admit it to ourselves. We stay surface level a lot, because I have friends and people in my life that need healing for a diagnosis. I'm not saying that's a surface prayer, but Lord, heal this person. But in the depth of, Lord, help me come alongside this person through what they're going through. Reveal to me your goodness in the midst, because there's nothing I can do. Because we wish all of our prayers were answered the way we want, and they don't always end up that way, because God knows what we need. What we want versus what we need. And so to me, God granted her this because he knew her heart.
Absolutely.
And what Samuel would be for the nation.
And he also understood the dynamics going on in the temple right then. Eli good priests doing, but his
No,
two sons,
they were a
oh
wreck.
my gosh, we're going to see they just destroy everything, and the trust of the people for the priests, it goes by the say. But young Samuel is coming up, and I think that's important because Eli, even in listening to her prayer, he thought she was drunk. Didn't deserve to be there. He's like, woman, get out of here. Take your alcohol with you and, get. And she says, no, I am not drunk. I am just in this anguish. And in that moment, Eli, even his heart is revealed because he's like, oh, well, may God grant your wish. So he even saw in her an authentic heart for God, where I wonder, when he looked at his sons, did he ever see that authentic heart? And so you have a father here doing battle too. His story is going to end terribly. Eli's story ends terribly. His son's story ends terribly. But ultimately, God is seeking a young Samuel who is going to turn his heart to the God who answers God's calling on his life. God calls out to him one night. He answers it here, that he's available to go and follow God. And so I think that that's critical in understanding this whole book of Samuel. Where are we seeing prayer? And is it truly heartfelt? We're going to get to the end of this section was chapter 8, and we see all the people, we want a king, we want a king. Do we want to be like all the other kingdoms? We want a king. And God clearly says to Samuel, they're not rejecting you, Samuel, they're rejecting me. Oh man, that breaks my heart, because that is God revealing his heart, saying, my people rejected me.
And we think about the world today and our prayers for these nations and the unsettled and the unrest, and what can my prayer do? But that heartfelt prayer, and it really is the same thing, like whatever the outcome is, only God sees the big picture. But we have to believe that when we're praying with all of our heart, that God is working even when we don't see the result. And Hannah, that heartfelt prayer came to be. She had the son and gave it, and then she went on to have more kids. God blessed her that way. But then what about the heartfelt prayer that I pray that doesn't get answered in a way that I see God's goodness, but it's still present? So it's the depth. It's not just how many times do you pray. It's the depth of how you pray, and it's how God enters into relationship with you at a deeper level.
And even shifting you, because I just hear God saying again, my people rejected me as their king. And Israel's going to fall at the end of chapter 8. It's a mess. It's a disaster. The Ark of the Covenant gets carted off to the Philistines, and Philistines have the Ark of the Covenant, and people are dying left and right, and they have got to figure something out. And even 2 cows bring the Ark of the Covenant back with no people. How does God do that? This is the mystery around God that amazes me all the time. And yet we want to put God in this little box with a little prayer that my life might end up like something.
And the details and understanding it, like the cow, like what does that have to do in the big scheme of things? There was purpose. And we just don't know what that purpose was.
Coming back to his own people, right? It's like God's always coming back to us, and yet we reject him. That's what we see a lot in this first section of Samuel. So we're just getting started in 1 Samuel. So it's amazing, but
just really taking these first 8 chapters and really just diving into Hannah, reading Hannah's prayer, her cry, and just trying to relate to it on a level that best you can, because it's really hard to relate to, but really seeing that selfless prayer that she had and what she experienced with the Lord, and then how she ends up giving back. It should really make us think about our prayer life and what are we praying for? How consistently she was going every day. She was there. Like how consistently are we doing it, and with what level and depth of our heart are we in? So our question, does God have your heart? When you pray, does God have your heart, or is that to-do list going through? I'm checking off, okay, I pray when I wake up. Pastor Tim said to pray and say, okay, God, here I am, and I did that. And then before I go to bed, it's not just a checking off list. It's that full heart. Are you all in? Does God have your heart? each and every time you pray, whether that prayer time is a time a day, or you've really engaged living a life of prayer from within in constant conversation with God.
Whether it's in anguish and crying, you don't try to find the perfect words.
Yeah.
Reveal your heart to God.
Because God already knows your heart, so you're not holding anything back from Him. So think about that this week. How does God have your heart? And does He have your heart? And to get ahead for next time, you will read 1 Samuel 9 through 16, and we'll see how the people are acting. Make it a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye.